Settle in and let your breathing slow, as if the air itself is getting heavier and kinder. Picture a rainforest at twilight, where the last light thins out and the humidity rests on your skin like a warm blanket. There is no real silence here, only a soft wall of living noise, dripping leaves, distant wings, and the slow, patient sound of things becoming soil. Tonight, you will wander gently through strange partnerships, fungi trading favors beneath your feet, ants farming in the dark, sloths wearing tiny gardens, and plants that offer shelter instead of teeth. The Sleepless Scientist will keep watch, quietly amused, while you simply sink deeper into the calm machinery of nature. You stand under the canopy and you think the trees are the main event. Tall trunks, glossy leaves, the kind of green that looks expensive. But that is the part meant to be seen. The real rainforest is lower, nearer, wetter. It is in the air that clings to your eyelashes. It is in the mud that grips your shoes like a slow hand. It is in the rot that smells faintly metallic, like rainwater left in an old pan. And it is in the thin, invisible filaments under your feet, doing business in the dark. The humidity is not just moisture, it is pressure, with manners, pressing against your skin, but politely. Every breath tastes like warm leaves and distant mushrooms, and the ghost of lightning. That sharp edge in the smell, that is ozone, a molecule born from storms and broken branches and the casual violence of weather. You hear insects sawing their tiny songs into the dusk. You hear frogs testing notes as if the night needs tuning. You hear drips, always drips, as if the forest is patiently leaking back into the ground. You might call it peaceful, but peace is a human word for moments when nothing is currently biting you. Out here, everything is alive and everything is hungry, and even the soil is busy. And silence, if you find it, is usually a warning. So do not look up at the canopy blocking out the stars. Look down where the real work is happening in the mud. Because beneath the leaf litter, beneath the fallen twigs, beneath the soft skins of decaying fruit, there is a network. Not a metaphorical network, not a poetic one. A physical web, threaded through the soil, thinner than hair, longer than you would ever want to measure. Fungal threads, hyphae, running like hidden wiring through the earth. If you kneel and gently brush aside a layer of damp leaves, you might see a pale strand. It looks like something spilled, like a scratch of milk across the dirt. It is easy to miss, and that is the point. Fungi do not need to stand tall. They are not here to impress you. They are here to connect. You take one slow step and the ground compresses. That pressure travels down and the web flexes. It does not scream. It does not complain. It simply adjusts the way an old city adjusts to footsteps above the subway. This is the Wood Wide Web, which is a cute name for something that is mostly about survival. The fungus spreads through soil and it wraps around roots. Sometimes it pushes inside, not to harm, not exactly, but to trade. The trade is old, older than forests as you imagine them. Plants are good at capturing sunlight, turning light into sugar. That is their special trick their quiet magic, photosynthesis. But plants are not as good at getting certain nutrients from the soil. Phosphorus, nitrogen, micronutrients, the little things that make life run smoothly. The soil holds them tight, and roots can be clumsy fingers. Fungi, on the other hand, are excellent at exploring. They can seep into tiny cracks, into narrow spaces, into pockets of mineral and decay. They can mine the earth with patience. So, the bargain forms. You, as a tree root, offer sugar, energy, the currency of sunlight. And the fungus offers minerals and nutrients, hauled in from places your roots cannot reach. It is not kindness. It is not friendship. It is commerce, performed in darkness, without receipts. The technical term is mycorrhiza, meaning fungus root, and it happens everywhere, in forests, in grasslands. In gardens you pretend are under control. In the rainforest, it becomes enormous. Picture it, a root tip, pale and tender, pushing through soil. Now picture a fungal thread touching it, then branching, then wrapping. The contact point becomes a marketplace. Sugars move one way, nutrients move the other, and chemical messages drift between them like whispered gossip. Trees, you see, are not lone towers. They are clustered citizens, and the fungal network is their underground courier system. Sometimes, an older tree, a veteran with a wide crown and deep roots, will send extra sugar to a younger sapling, a child growing in shade, barely catching enough light to pay its bills. It happens through the fungus, not because the older tree is noble, more because forests are brutal, and the best strategy is often to keep your own kind alive. If you help your seedlings survive, you increase the odds that your genes, or at least your species, keeps its claim on this patch of earth. And the fungus, always the fungus, takes its cut. You might imagine the network as a set of neat lines, like cables, but it is more like a living fog of threads, a soft mesh that thickens near roots and thins out into the wider soil. And it carries more than food. It carries warnings. In the daylight world, a caterpillar bites a leaf. The leaf does not just accept this. It is not a passive salad. It releases chemicals, distress signals. Some of those signals drift through air, calling in predators of the caterpillar. And some slip downward into the roots, into the fungal network. Out there in the soil, the signal spreads, not like a lightning bolt, more like a slow ripple through wet cloth. Nearby plants receive it, and they prepare. They might thicken their defenses, making bitter compounds or toughening leaf tissue, not because they are thinking, because chemistry favors those that react in time. So you stand in twilight, and above you, the leaves are still. But below you, there is a conversation. A million quiet transactions. A million little alarms. The forest feels calm because its movement is small. But do not confuse small movements with small importance. A fungus does not have muscles. It does not have bones. It does not have eyes to look at you with judgment. It just grows. It grows toward food. It grows away from danger. It grows into everything it can reach. And it is very good at reaching. Some individual fungal organisms, or rather, fungal colonies, can spread across acres. They can be older than your cities, older than your recorded history, older than your sense of ownership, which is always a comforting thought when you are trying to sleep. Somewhere beneath your species, something patient is calmly outliving you. And yet, the fungus is not in charge. It is a middleman. It is a broker. The trees do not need it for every breath, and the fungus cannot photosynthesize, cannot make sugar from light. Each is missing something. Each fills the other's gap. Symbiosis, life together, you probably learned that word, with smiling diagrams. Two creatures helping each other as if nature is a community garden. But symbiosis is not a moral story. It is not a fairy tale about cooperation. It is a strategy. Sometimes it is gentle, sometimes it is exploitation with good public relations. In this soil, the relationship is usually mutualistic. Both partners benefit. But benefit can be uneven, and it can change. If a tree is weak, it has less sugar to give. The fungus may reduce service or favor another client. If the fungus is stressed, it may take more sugar, offering less in return. No one signs a contract. The contract is enforced by survival. You take another step, and the wet ground sighs. The smell changes slightly. More sweet rot now, less stored metal. Somewhere nearby, something falls. A fruit too heavy for its stem. It hits leaves with a dull thump, like a soft fist, and you realize the forest is always dropping things, always shedding. Those fallen leaves, those dead branches, they are not trash. They are the fuel. They are the reason the soil is rich and the reason fungi can thrive. Fungi are not just traders. They are decomposers, the ones that dismantle. They secrete enzymes, tiny molecular tools, and they break complex plant matter into smaller pieces. Cellulose, lignin, the stubborn scaffolding of wood. Without fungi and bacteria, forests would choke on their own dead. They would become piles of undecayed branches, stacked like unpaid bills. Instead, the rainforest eats itself politely and continuously. You would think the trees are the rulers here, but it is more accurate to say they are tenants, renting space above an empire of microbes. Now, while you are admiring this underground economy, something crosses your path. A thin movement, quick and sure, then another, then another. A line forms as if the forest floor has suddenly grown a moving seam. Leafcutter ants. While the trees whisper underneath your feet, a much busier civilization is marching right over them. At first, it looks like a parade, a neat ribbon of bodies, each ant carrying a piece of leaf overhead. The leaf fragments are bright green, almost glowing in the dim. They bob as the ants walk, like 1,000 tiny flags. You might think the ants are eating the leaves. That is what it looks like. A simple theft. Cut, carry, chew. But you are wrong, in a way that is almost charming. Leafcutter ants do not eat the leaves. They farm them. Follow the line, slowly, the way you might follow a stream. The ants move with purpose, but not panic. They know where they are going, They have done this for millions of years. Their jaws are precise tools, sharp, curved blades that can slice plant tissue cleanly. They choose certain leaves, avoid others, and sometimes even prefer new growth. Not because they are gourmets, because leaves carry chemicals, toxins, defenses, bitter compounds meant to discourage herbivores. The ants can tolerate some of it, but they are not trying to digest a salad. They are feeding a fungus. Down the line, the ants disappear into a hole in the ground. The entrance is not dramatic, just a gap among roots, a dark mouth in the soil. And beneath that mouth is a city. The nest can be enormous. Chambers and tunnels, ventilation shafts, waste dumps, a living architecture, carved and maintained by mandibles and instinct. Inside, the air is warm and damp. It smells like plant pulp and wet earth, like a compost pile that learned engineering. The ants bring leaf pieces into a chamber, and other workers meet them. The leaves are chewed into pulp, mixed with saliva, and shaped into a soft greenish mesh. Then the fungus arrives, not walking, not hunting, just growing, spreading across the prepared substrate like cream on bread. This fungus is the ant's crop, a specific species, carefully tended, protected, and propagated. The ants weed it. They remove contaminants. They groom it with their antennae, like farmers checking seedlings. They even carry bacteria on their bodies, a kind of living pesticide. These bacteria produce chemicals that suppress parasitic fungi. So you have ants farming fungus protected by bacteria, a layered alliance, like a small economy built from mouths and microbes. The fungus does what fungi do best. It breaks down plant matter. It digests compounds that would trouble the ants, and it turns leaf pulp into something edible. The ants then eat the fungus, specifically nutritious swollen tips of fungal strands, called gongolidia. It is a word that sounds like a toy, but it is food made of fungal tissue, rich with sugars and nutrients. So the ants do not eat leaves. They eat fungus grown on leaves. A clever workaround. If you are an ant and your world is mostly plant material that is hard to digest, you outsource digestion. You build a fungal stomach outside your body. Congratulations! You have invented agriculture, and not the cute kind with sun hats. The relentless kind that runs 24 hours a day, underground, with no holidays. This partnership is ancient, something like 50 million years old, give or take a few million, because the rainforest does not keep neat records. That is longer than primates have been around, longer than grasses dominated landscapes, longer than anything you have ever worried about. Leafcutter ants have been farming fungus since before your species had a name, and they are still doing it, quietly, without writing a single manifesto about it. Their society is organized, but not sentimental. There are castes, workers of different sizes. Small workers tend the fungus. Larger workers cut leaves. Soldiers defend the colony with heavier jaws. The queen, deep inside, is a living egg factory. She can lay thousands of eggs a day. She started her colony carrying a small piece of fungus from her birth nest. A starter culture held in her mouth, protected like a sacred loaf of dough. That fungus is her inheritance. And when she founds a new nest, she plants it, not in soil, in carefully prepared plant pulp. You might admire the efficiency. You might even call it beautiful. But remember, the ants are not doing this out of curiosity. They are not little scientists. They are hungry. Their entire civilization is built to convert leaves into ant bodies, using fungus as the processing plant. And the rainforest tolerates them because the rainforest tolerates everything that works. Sometimes, the ants strip a tree bare, taking more leaves than seems fair, but the trees survive, often regrowing. And in return, the ants aerate soil, move nutrients, and provide food for predators. Nothing is wasted. Everything is part of something else's plan. You watch the antline for a while, until your eyes begin to blur with the steady motion. It is hypnotic. The repetition, the certainty, the tiny green flags moving into darkness. And then the forest reminds you, not everyone works this hard. Some creatures have turned laziness into a survival strategy. Not everyone builds cities under your feet. Some simply hang and let the world grow on them. Somewhere above, draped across a branch like a discarded coat, there is a sloth. You might miss it at first. That is part of its skill. The sloth is not hiding behind leaves. It is hiding as leaves. Its fur is coarse and strangely grooved. Those grooves trap moisture, and moisture invites life. Algae grows in the sloth's fur, a soft green haze that turns its back into a living garden. The sloth moves so slowly that the algae has time to settle in, time to spread, time to become part of the animal's appearance. This is not dirt. This is not neglect. This is symbiosis again. The algae benefits by gaining a home, high in the canopy where sunlight is available. The sloth benefits by gaining camouflage. Predators scan the branches, and the sloth looks like a mossy limb. It is a strange kind of invisibility, achieved not by speed or sharp senses, but by becoming part of the background. And the sloth goes further. Inside that fur, among the algae, live moths. Tiny, pale moths that spend their lives in the sloth's coat as if it is a moving apartment complex. They mate there, they rest there, they cling to the sloth through rainstorms and heat, through days that feel like wet towels. When the sloth climbs down to the ground, a rare and risky journey, the moths use the opportunity to lay eggs in the sloth's dung. Yes, this story is going exactly where you think. The sloth, for reasons that are still being studied and argued over, climbs down about once a week to defecate at the base of a tree. This is a dangerous trip. On the ground, the sloth is clumsy and slow, and predators are not impressed by its calm attitude. But it goes anyway. When it does, the moths leave the fur briefly, lay eggs in the fresh dung, and then return with the sloth to the canopy. The moth larvae hatch in the dung. They feed. They develop. Eventually, adult moths fly up into the canopy to find another sloth. And the dung, rich in nutrients, feeds the forest floor and the roots and the microbial life. But the cycle may be even tighter. The moths, living in the sloth's fur, may add nitrogen. Their bodies, their waste, their eventual death, all of it becomes fertilizer in miniature. That fertilizer feeds the algae, so the sloth provides a home to moths. The moths help fertilize algae. The algae camouflages the sloth, a slow, circular bargain carried out on fur. It is oddly domestic, like a small household ecosystem, a little garden on a moving mammal. And the sloth itself, it is built for slowness. Its metabolism is low. Its body temperature can drift. It digests leaves, which are not generous food. It lives on a diet that barely supports enthusiasm. But in a rainforest where energy can be scarce in certain niches, slowness becomes an advantage. Move less, burn less, be boring enough that predators overlook you. The sloth is the rainforest's lesson in minimalism. Own less. Do less. Become furniture. You watch it hang there, claws hooked over a branch, face relaxed in permanent indifference. It looks peaceful, but that peace is earned by sacrificing speed and by accepting vulnerability. And then, as if to prove a point, the sloth begins one of its careful movements. Not a dramatic climb, just a slow reach, a deliberate pull. Muscles engage. Quietly, the fur shifts, and a few moths flutter. Disturbed, the algae catches a faint shimmer of twilight, and for a moment, you can imagine being that sloth, living slowly enough that other species use you as habitat. It is a strange honor to be useful as a place. Of course, the rainforest is full of places. Some are safer than others. Speaking of dangerous places to rest, let us look at a bed that might just digest you. Somewhere in the understory, where light is stingy and the air is still, there is a plant shaped like a vessel, a green pitcher, a hollow tube, sometimes with a lid like a little roof. Pitcher plants are famous for one thing. They are traps. They lure insects with nectar and scent. The insect lands, slips on a waxy rim, and falls into the tube. Inside is liquid, sometimes rainwater, sometimes digestive fluid, often a mixture. The insect drowns, breaks down, and becomes nutrients. It is a plant doing what soil would normally do, digesting. Because pitcher plants often live in places where soil is poor, where nitrogen is scarce. They cannot afford to wait for luck, so they hunt in their quiet, botanical way. But in Borneo, in the dim world of tropical montane forests, there is a pitcher plant that does something different. It stops being a mouth and becomes a bedroom. The plant is called Nepenthes hemsliana, a name that feels too long for something that just wants to sit there and wait. And it has a relationship with a small bat, the woolly bat Caravula hardwicki. The bat is small, with soft fur and a face that looks permanently surprised by humidity. It needs a place to roost during the day, a safe place, sheltered from rain, hidden from predators, and preferably not full of spiders with opinions. The pitcher plant offers exactly that. This particular pitcher has a shape that suits the bat, a longer tube, a structure that holds air comfortably, and an opening that is not too slick for a bat to cling to. The bat crawls inside and rests, hanging in the pitcher like a piece of living punctuation. and the plant does not digest the bat, a remarkable restraint for a carnivorous organism. Instead, the plant benefits from what the bat leaves behind. Guano. Bat droppings accumulate in the pitcher, and they are rich in nitrogen. The plant absorbs the nutrients. It gets fertilizer delivered directly into its cup without needing to catch enough insects. The bat gets shelter. The plant gets food. Symbiosis again, but with a slightly grosser exchange rate. And it becomes even stranger when you consider how they find each other. Some research suggests the pitcher plant has evolved a shape that reflects the bat's echolocation calls in a helpful way. The plant, in a sense, becomes acoustically visible. You can imagine it as a signpost, but for sound. The bat sends out ultrasonic pulses, and the pitcher returns an echo that says, calmly, vacancy available. So, you have a plant advertising to a mammal using physics, not fragrance, not color, but sonar. You might call that clever. You might call it eerie. I call it typical. Nature will use whatever channel works. Light, scent, vibration, chemistry, sound. And if it can turn a death trap into a rental property, it will. Inside the pitcher, the bat rests. Outside, rain falls in warm sheets, then stops. Mist rises from the leaves. The forest breathes. It is almost cozy until you remember what pitcher plants usually do to their guests. Sometimes the shelter is safe, and sometimes the shelter is a tomb that you never leave. Not every partnership is comfortable. Some are necessary, some are tragic. Some are so specific that if one partner disappears, the other follows. And if you want a symbiosis that feels like a quiet horror story told in a kitchen, you want the fig and the wasp. Somewhere nearby, there is a fig tree. Its branches hold what look like fruits, round, soft shapes, green or purple, depending on the species. You might think a fig is a fruit in the normal sense, a sweet thing that grows after a flower is pollinated. But a fig is more complicated. A fig is an inverted flower, a flower that decided to bloom inward into a hollow structure called a syconium. So, the fig you see, that bulb, is not a single fruit. It is a chamber filled with tiny flowers on the inside, a hidden garden, sealed up. And because it is sealed, it cannot be pollinated by casual wind or by any random bee wandering by. It needs a specialist. It needs a wasp small enough, determined enough, and doomed enough to crawl inside. The fig wasp. The relationship between figs and fig wasps is one of the tightest co-evolved partnerships on Earth. Often, a particular fig species, they have shaped each other over millions of years, like two keys filed to match. Here is how it feels. If you are the wasp, you are a female, no bigger than a grain of rice. Your body is built for one mission. Find a fig at the right stage, crawl inside, lay eggs, and in the process, pollinate the inner flowers. You hover in the humid air, guided by scent. The fig releases chemicals that tell you it is ready. You land near a small opening on the fig, called the ostiole. It is not a welcoming door. It is a tight, layered passage, like a bundle of overlapping scales. You push in anyway. It is cramped. It scrapes your body. You squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And as you force your way through, you lose parts of yourself. Wings tear away. Antennae break. Sometimes legs are damaged. There is no backing out. Congratulations, you have committed. Inside, the world changes. It is dark and warm and smells like plant tissue and sweet latex. The inner walls are lined with tiny flowers, waiting. You crawl across them, carrying pollen from the fig where you were born. You lay eggs in some of the flowers, injecting them with your future. Other flowers you pollinate, allowing them to develop seeds. This is the trade. Your offspring get a safe nursery, protected inside the fig. The fig gets pollination, which it cannot get any other way. You, personally, do not get to leave. Most female fig wasps die inside the fig. Their bodies are broken down by enzymes, absorbed, recycled. Even in death, you become part of the system. Later, your offspring hatch. The males emerge first. They are often wingless. They will never see the world outside. Their job is to find females still in their galls, mate with them, and then dig an exit tunnel through the fig wall. After that, the males usually die inside the fig. No flight, no sunlight, just a brief existence in a crowded chamber. The females, newly mated, collect pollen and crawl out through the tunnel. Then they fly off, searching for another fig, guided by scent, repeating the cycle. It is precise. It is efficient. It is, depending on your mood, either beautiful or bleak. A whole life spent in service of a fruit that is not even a fruit, technically. And the fig itself, it swells, ripens, becomes sweet. Animals eat it, spreading the seeds. The forest continues. You can hold a fig in your hand and feel none of this. It feels soft, harmless, a snack. But inside that softness is a sealed chamber, once full of tiny lives, a nursery and a grave. That is the rainforest style. Everything gentle contains something sharp. From the claustrophobic inside of a fig, it is tempting to rush toward open air. But the rainforest is generous with discomfort. So we move slowly toward places where life has to cooperate just to exist. From soil and trees, from insects and mammals, toward partnerships that can live on bare rock. And that is where we will go next, to lichens, the impossible marriage where a fungus and an alga hold each other together against the indifferent surface of the world. You leave the soft, wet generosity of soil behind, and you notice how quickly comfort ends. The air thins a little as you climb, or maybe it only feels thinner because the ground changes under you. Less leaf litter, more exposed stone, more bark that is scraped clean by rain, more places where roots have not bothered to pretend they own anything. Here, the world is simple in an ugly way. Rock, wind, sun, water, and time that does not care if you are small. And you, unfortunately, are small. You stand before a boulder that has been sitting here long enough to forget why it fell. Its surface is rough, cold where the dusk touches it, It smells like minerals, like the inside of a clay pot. No sweetness of fruit, no warm breath of compost. You think nothing lives on rock. You think life needs soil, or at least something soft to sink into. Wrong. Life can live on stone if it is willing to cooperate and if it is willing to be patient to the point of insult. Look closely at the rock's skin, not at the cracks, not at the mossy edges, at the crust. There are patches, pale green, gray, yellow, even a burnt orange. They look like old paint or dried chewing gum pressed flat by weather. Some are dusty, some are leathery, some are cracked like dried lake beds. This is lichen, not a plant, not one creature, a relationship, an arrangement so intimate that it spends its whole life pretending to be a single organism. Because it is easier that way. The fungus is the structure, the builder, the landlord with a long, slow plan. The alga, or sometimes a cyanobacterium, which is a bacterium that learned how to do photosynthesis, is the kitchen, the cook, the one that can take sunlight and turn it into sugar. The fungus cannot do that trick. No chlorophyll, no sunlight alchemy, so it builds a body around something that can... You can imagine the fungus weaving a shelter, wrapping filaments around the photosynthetic cells, holding them in place, not gently exactly, more like a careful restraint. In return, the alga gets protection, because sunlight is wonderful, but it is also a violent thing. It dries you, it heats you, it bombards you with ultraviolet radiation, which is just sunlight with sharper teeth. Out here on bare rock, you have no shade and no spare water. So the fungus makes a humid little microclimate, a thin, living layer that holds moisture longer than exposed cells ever could. This is why lichen is often described as an impossible marriage, because it is not a casual friendship. It is cohabitation at the cellular level, the kind where you cannot tell where one life ends and the other begins, unless you peel them apart under a microscope. And even then, it feels rude. If you were expecting romance, you will not get it. Symbiosis is not candles and violin music. It is two organisms discovering that together they can survive a place that would otherwise erase them. You step closer. The lichen is cool to the touch, slightly spongy in some spots, brittle in others. If you scrape it, it gives like dry skin. A faint earthy smell rises, not soil, but something older, quieter. Lichen comes in different forms. Crustose lichens cling tight, like they are glued to the rock. They spread as thin crusts, refusing to lift, refusing to let wind get underneath. Foliose lichens form leaf-like lobes, little flaps that curl at the edges. They look like miniature cabbage leaves pressed against stone. Fruticose lichens grow upright or dangling, branching like tiny shrubs. These are the ones that look like pale coral or like a beard on the world. If you have ever seen old trees wearing gray strands like hair, that is often fruticose lichen. It makes the forest look wise, even when the forest is mostly just damp. Now, here is the part that makes lichen feel like a trick. You can take two lichens that look identical, same shape, same color, and they might be completely different partnerships, different fungi, different algae. Or you can take one fungus and it can partner with different algae, depending on where it lives. The relationship is flexible, but the lichen body, the thallus, is the result of the partnership, a shared architecture. And that shared body is built for endurance, not speed. Lichens grow so slowly, you could mistake it for not growing at all, less than a millimeter a year, sometimes. A human hair's width, if the year is generous. You can stare at it for an hour and see nothing change, and you will feel ridiculous, like you are waiting for a rock to blink. But in that slowness is power. Because lichens are often the first living thing to colonize bare surfaces, fresh volcanic rock, newly exposed soil after glaciers retreat, concrete walls you thought were too clean for nature, they show up early, and they begin the long project of turning stone into something softer. How? Chemistry and stubbornness. The fungus in the lichen produces acids, organic acids that slowly dissolve minerals at the rock surface. Not dramatically, no sizzling, just slow etching molecular theft. Tiny grains loosen. Dust forms. The lichen traps it. Bits of dead lichen accumulate. A thin layer of organic matter starts to exist where there was none. Over years, decades, centuries, the lichen helps make the first crude soil. Not rich soil, not garden soil, but enough for other organisms to start getting ideas. So, when you look at lichen on stone, you are looking at a pioneer, a quiet vandal. It is life breaking down the world, gently, efficiently, until the world is habitable. And if you are thinking, that sounds noble, remember it is not doing this for you. It is doing it because rock is available and competition is low. The best real estate is often the place no one else wants. You kneel and bring your face closer to a patch of pale green lichen. In the dim light, it looks almost frosted. You think it must be delicate, vulnerable, and yes, in some ways it is. Lichens do not like air pollution. They absorb water and nutrients right through their surface, and they also absorb whatever else is in the air. Sulfur compounds, heavy metals, nitrogen pollution, all of it can poison them. That is why lichen has been used as a bioindicator, a living warning system. When lichens disappear from a place, it is often a sign that the air has become unfriendly, even to organisms that live on rock. But lichens also have a talent that makes them feel almost supernatural. They can survive drying out completely. Not just a little dry, not uncomfortable dry, desiccated, brittle, apparently dead. Then, when water returns from fog or rain or dew, they rehydrate. Metabolism resumes. Photosynthesis starts again. They are not immortal. They are not magical. They are just very good at pausing. The term you might hear is cryptobiosis, hidden life, a state where the organism's metabolism becomes nearly undetectable. Some lichens can lose most of their water content and wait days, months, in some environments, much longer. It is a survival strategy that feels, from a human perspective, like cheating. You cannot pause your life when conditions get inconvenient. You can only complain. Lichen does not complain. It simply stops. And because it can stop, It can survive places that swing between extremes. Hot sun in the day, freezing at night, long dry spells, sudden soaking rain. Lichen endures it by refusing to play until the conditions are fair again. There is something else, something stranger. Some lichens have survived exposure to the vacuum of space. Yes, space. Cold, radiation, no pressure. The kind of environment that makes your lungs a historical artifact. Experiments have exposed lichen to space conditions for days, sometimes longer, and some species have shown the ability to recover afterward. Not thriving out there, not building little lichen cities on satellites, just surviving, pausing and then restarting when they are back in a place with air and water. It is a reminder that life's definition of survival is not always active. Sometimes survival is simply refusing to die on schedule. So you were standing by a rock, looking at a crust, and that crust belongs to a partnership that can take space itself and treat it like an unpleasant waiting room. Congratulations, you have found the most patient thing in the forest. And because lichens grow so slowly, they become accidental historians. A lichen patch might be older than the tree beside it, older than the trail you walked in on, older than the idea that this forest needed a name. Some lichens in harsh environments can be hundreds, even thousands of years old. They do not remember anything, of course. No brain, but their bodies hold time. The way stone holds time. If you ever see a boulder covered in lichen, you are looking at a surface that has been stable for a long time. Because lichens do not like being scraped off. They do not like being buried. They are not built for moving, so they tell you quietly where the world has stayed still. That is a rare kind of information in a rainforest where everything else is always falling, rotting, growing, or crawling. You stand, letting your knees unbend slowly, and you look back toward the trees. The canopy is darker now. The last light has thinned into a deep blue smear between leaves. You can feel the forest temperature change, not drastically, but enough to notice. The air becomes less like a worn towel and more like a damp sheet left out too long. The photosynthetic world is closing its eyes. Leaves stop making sugar. Algae slows down. Even the lichen's tiny kitchen goes quiet, waiting for morning. But the forest does not become inactive. It just shifts. Because when the sun goes away, a different kind of light begins to matter. Down near the ground where you started, the place of rot and fungus and hidden commerce, you begin to see points of color. Not fireflies, not reflected starlight, something softer, a greenish glow, faint at first, like someone spilled diluted paint into the dark. Then another glow, a little farther away. Then a small cluster, like a constellation pinned to a fallen log. You think your eyes are adjusting. You think it is a trick of moonlight, but the canopy blocks most moonlight, and the glow is coming from under the leaves, not above them. This is bioluminescence, light made by chemistry. The forest floor is doing what humans do with lamps, except it is doing it with enzymes and molecules and no concern for your sense of wonder. You walk slowly toward the glow, careful where you place your feet. The mud is slick, and the roots are raised like knuckles. As you approach, the source becomes clear. Mushrooms. Small caps clustered at the base of a decaying stump. Their gills glow faintly green, as if lit from within by a dying screen. They look unreal, like decoration, but they are not performing for you. They are advertising. In the dark, color is useless, and scent can only travel so far. Light can be seen at a distance. The chemistry behind it is an old trick used by many organisms. You may know it from fireflies. A molecule called luciferin reacts with oxygen, helped by an enzyme called luciferase. The reaction releases energy as light, not much heat, not a flame, a cold glow, efficient, controlled. In fungi, the exact details vary by species, but the result is the same. A mushroom that shines like a ghost. That is why people call them ghost fungi, or foxfire when the glow comes from decaying wood threaded with luminous mycelium. Names like that make it sound mystical, but the reality is more practical. The fungus wants its spores to travel. Spores are the fungal equivalent of seeds, tiny reproductive units meant to spread and start new growth. They are released into air or carried by water or hitchhike on animals. In daylight, wind can do a lot of work. In night, forests, the air is still, heavy with moisture. So some fungi recruit insects. A glowing mushroom in the dark is like a billboard or an unskippable advertisement, but at least this one feeds you. Insects that move at night, drawn to the glow, land on the mushroom. They crawl through spores. Spores cling to their legs and bodies. Then the insect leaves, taking the spores along, delivering them to new places without understanding it has been hired. It is not a friendship. It is logistics. You crouch near the glowing cluster and look closely. The light is steady, not pulsing like a firefly, just a constant low glow, like embers that forgot to be hot. In some species, the glow is brighter in the gills, where spores are produced. A convenient placement. Come here, it says. Brush against the important parts. Some luminous fungi live on dead wood, and their glowing mycelium can run through the log like veins. If you peel back bark, you might see lines of pale green light tracing the grain. It is beautiful in the way that mold can be beautiful if you stop flinching. It also means the log is being eaten. Fungi do not have mouths. They do not chew. They digest from the outside in, releasing enzymes into wood, breaking polymers into smaller molecules, absorbing the results. The glow is happening while the wood structure is being dismantled. A soft lantern powered by decay. If you listen, you hear the forest's night noises shift. Day insects quiet down. Night insects begin their work. There is a deeper chirping now, and occasional wing beats that sound heavy in the damp air. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls. One note, then silence. The glow does not brighten the forest. It does not turn night into day. It only makes small islands of visibility, small hints that life continues, even when you cannot see it. You might think glowing fungi are rare, a novelty. They are uncommon, but not singular. There are many known species across the world, especially in humid forests. Some in the genus Mycena, small, delicate mushrooms, others in different groups, each with its own version of the chemical machinery, and scientists still argue about the exact evolutionary reason in some cases. Attracting insects is a strong idea, supported by observations, but biology is rarely satisfied with one explanation. Sometimes light could be a byproduct of metabolism. Sometimes it might deter certain organisms. Sometimes it might do multiple things poorly, which is a very natural outcome. Evolution is not a designer. It is a filter. Whatever survives, stays. You reach out, not touching, just hovering your fingers near the glow. You can feel nothing. Of course, light does not warm your skin here, but you can imagine the tiny chemical reactions happening in each cell. Oxygen meeting luciferin, enzymes guiding the exchange, photons spilling out into the night. You are watching energy leave a body as light. In a way, you are watching the forest speak. Not with words, with wavelengths, and then slowly you stand again and let your eyes drift outward. With the glowing mushrooms scattered around, the forest floor looks like a night sky flipped upside down. Stars below your feet, hidden among leaves. It is an inversion that feels almost polite, as if the forest is trying to give you the stars it stole with its canopy. But do not be grateful. The same fungus that makes this gentle glow is also part of something relentless. Because when the light fades, when the insects move on, when the spores have been delivered, what remains is the real work. The slow, comforting rot, the thing that turns fallen giants into soil and returns borrowed atoms back to circulation. You walk away from the glowing cluster and the darkness closes behind you like water. As you move, your shoes sink slightly into damp leaf litter. Each step releases a faint smell, sweet, earthy, and sharp. That smell is not just leaves. It is chemistry. Rotting plant matter releases volatile compounds, little signals that tell you life is being dismantled nearby. And somewhere in that smell is a familiar note, the scent people call petrichor, that clean, earthy smell after rain. Part of it comes from plant oils, yes, but a major contributor comes from microbes. A compound called geosmin, produced by certain bacteria. Geosmin smells like wet soil and clean air, and it is, in a way, the perfume of microbial death and activity. A lot of those bacteria get jolted by rain. Their spores and cells are disturbed. Geosmin becomes airborne. So when you smell that comforting rain scent, you are smelling the soil's biology waking up, and in some cases, being torn apart. Congratulations, your nostalgia is made of bacteria. The forest floor is littered with dead things, leaves, branches, insect bodies, fallen fruit, the occasional feather. Even living things leak, shed skin cells, drop waste, bleed, die. Without decomposition, this place would drown in its own leftovers. Instead, the rainforest runs a recycling program so aggressive it borders on rude. Decomposition is not a single process. It is a crowd. Fungi, bacteria, insects, mites, worms, each taking bites, each breaking down molecules in their own way. You can picture it like a slow fire. Not flame, but oxidation. Energy stored in complex organic molecules is released gradually as bonds are broken and rearranged. Carbon compounds are dismantled, nutrients are freed, nitrogen returns to the soil, phosphorus becomes available again, micronutrients rejoin the cycle, and carbon goes everywhere. Some becomes part of microbial bodies, some becomes part of fungi, some is released as CO2, exhaled by decomposers as they metabolize. In anaerobic pockets, where oxygen is scarce, decomposition can produce methane, a different gas with a stronger warming effect if it escapes. But in well-aerated forest soils, much of the decomposition ends up as CO2 and new biomass. The forest is constantly breathing, not just through leaves, but through rot. You step near a fallen log. It is darker than the surrounding leaf litter, almost black in places. The bark is peeling, soft like damp cardboard. If you press a finger into it, it yields. This log was once a tree, tall, hard, full of water pulled from roots to leaves. Now it is a sponge of decay. Fungal mycelium runs through it like hidden lace. Wood-boring beetle larvae tunnel inside, turning cellulose into frass, which is insect waste, basically sawdust that has been digested. Termites might be here too, depending on the forest. Ants, springtails, mites that look like moving dust. Each creature takes a different fraction of the log. Some eat softer parts, some chew harder lignin if they have symbionts in their gut that can handle it. Many animals cannot digest cellulose alone. They need microbes. So even inside an insect gut, you find symbiosis again. Bacteria breaking down plant fibers, producing usable compounds. It is fungi and microbes all the way down. If you could shrink yourself, become something the size of a grain of sand, and walk inside this log, you would feel like you entered a cathedral built from collapsing scaffolding. Fibers, pores, water films clinging to surfaces, tiny air pockets, and everywhere, enzymes. Enzymes are the real tools here. Fungi produce enzymes like cellulases and lignin-degrading enzymes, which chop up tough plant polymers. Bacteria produce their own toolkits, targeting different compounds. These enzymes are not alive. They are proteins, folded machines. They bind to specific molecules and make reactions easier, faster, possible at the temperatures life can tolerate. Without enzymes, decomposition would still happen, but so slowly that forests would become museums of dead wood. With enzymes, the forest can erase a fallen tree in a handful of years, sometimes faster. The rainforest's warmth and moisture accelerate everything. In colder forests, logs can persist for decades. In the tropics, the air itself seems eager to break things down. It is why tropical soils can be strangely thin and nutrient poor, despite the lush growth above. Most of the nutrients are not stored in deep soil. They are stored in living biomass, in trees and vines and leaves. When something dies, the nutrients are quickly grabbed back up by roots and microbes. It is less a pantry and more a conveyor belt. So you are not walking on a rich savings account. You are walking on a busy cash register, and you can feel it in the way the ground gives under you. The forest floor is not solid. It is layered. Fresh leaves on top, still shaped like leaves. Under that, partially decomposed litter, darker, softer. Under that, humus, organic matter that has been transformed into a rich, crumbly mix. And under that, mineral soil, sometimes surprisingly shallow. Before you hit rock or clay, you might expect the rainforest to have deep, luxurious soil. It looks like it should, but the system is too efficient for that. Everything is recycled quickly because competition is intense and nothing sits around waiting. You pause and listen again. The forest is still loud, but the quality of sound has changed. More buzzing, more clicking, occasional soft rustles as something small moves through leaves. And beneath it all, the constant drip. Water is always moving here. It falls from leaves, travels down bark, gathers in pockets, sinks into soil. That water carries dissolved nutrients, and it also threatens to wash them away. So roots and fungi and microbes must grab what they can, fast. Otherwise, the rainforest would bleed its nutrients into streams and into rivers and eventually into the ocean, like loose change falling from a torn pocket. In this way, the rainforest is not just a forest. It is a machine designed to hold on to what it needs, and decomposition is the machine's heart. You step over a patch of fungus that looks like pale fingers emerging from the soil. A fruiting body. A mushroom's job is not to be pretty. It is to spread spores. The main body of the fungus is elsewhere. In the soil, in the wood, in the unseen network. The mushroom is an event, a brief performance, a reproductive gesture. Then it collapses and becomes food for something else. Even fungi get decomposed. Nothing is exempt. You look up at a tree trunk. There are small shelves of bracket fungi attached like steps. Hard, woody structures. These fungi specialize in wood decay. Some cause white rot, breaking down lignin and leaving pale fibrous cellulose behind. Others cause brown rot, breaking down cellulose and leaving behind brown, crumbly lignin. Each creates a different texture of decay. It is like different artists choosing different parts of the same sculpture to remove. As the wood changes, different organisms move in. Decomposition is succession, a changing community over time. First, opportunists that eat easy sugars, then specialists that can handle tougher compounds, then others that feed on what remains. A dead tree becomes habitat, a food source, a nursery. If you were a beetle, this log would be a city. If you were a fungus, this log would be a pantry. If you were a bacterium, it would be a landscape of wet surfaces and chemical opportunities. Everything depends on something dying, and everything benefits from something breaking down. It sounds grim, but it is also how life persists without running out of parts. You can think of it as the forest's version of immortality, not the immortality of individuals, the immortality of atoms. The carbon in your skin once belonged to something else, a leaf, a plankton cell, a dinosaur. If you want drama, and it will belong to something else again. That is the comfort hidden in rot. The forest does not mourn, it recycles. You walk farther, and the smell becomes stronger near a patch of disturbed soil. Perhaps a wild pig rooted here earlier, tearing up the ground, for tubers. Perhaps a fallen branch exposed the lower layers. The scent is dense, wet earth and sweetness and something almost spicy. That is microbial activity. That is the smell of bonds breaking and reforming. If you had the patience to measure it, you could track the heat of decomposition. In compost piles, the center can get surprisingly warm as microbes work and release energy. In the rainforest floor, the effect is subtler, spread out, but it is there. A slow heat distributed across billions of tiny reactions. A low-grade furnace made of digestion. And it is not just fungi and bacteria. There are detritivores, animals that eat dead organic matter, millipedes that chew leaf litter, earthworms in some tropical soils, though not everywhere, isopods, little armored crustaceans that look like living pills. They fragment the material, increasing surface area, more edges for microbes to attack, more places for enzymes to work. They are the shredders. Then microbes are the chemical dismantlers. Together, they turn structure into softness. The rainforest is always making soil and always using it. You pause beside a small mound, an ant nest perhaps, or the crumbly remains of old wood. You realize that many of the partnerships you have seen tonight connect back to decomposition. The wood wide web depends on soil nutrients made available by microbial breakdown. Leafcutter ants depend on fungus digestion of leaves. Sloths feed the forest floor with their dung, which fuels microbes. Pitcher plants take nitrogen from bat droppings. Figs digest their wasps, recycling their bodies. Even lichens on rock begin soil formation. Everything is feeding the cycle, and the cycle is indifferent. It does not care if you are useful. It does not care if you are beautiful. It only cares if you can be broken down into parts that can be used. You think you are separate from this because you have a bed and walls and disinfectant wipes. But your body is a rainforest in miniature, a warm, wet place full of symbiosis and decomposition. Bacteria live on your skin, eating oils, producing odors you then try to hide with soap and perfume. More bacteria live in your gut, breaking down fibers you cannot digest alone. You are not one organism. You are a consortium with a nervous system that takes credit. And one day, when your cells stop cooperating, the same logic will apply. You will be returned, but that is not tonight. Tonight, you are just walking in a forest that has been doing this far longer than you have been alive and will keep doing it long after your name is forgotten. The comforting part is not that you matter. The comforting part is that the system does not require your supervision. You keep moving, and the night deepens. Somewhere, a branch creaks. Something shifts above you. Maybe a monkey settling in. Maybe a bird adjusting feathers. The air is slightly cooler now, but still thick. Moisture beads on your arms. You can taste the forest when you breathe. A mix of plant compounds, fungal spores, and the faint metallic note of distant water. Spores are everywhere, by the way. When you walk through a rainforest, you are walking through a fog of reproductive ambition. Each breath carries tiny particles, most harmless, some irritating, a few capable of colonizing the right surface, if given the chance. Fungal spores are designed to endure. Thick walls, resistant structures, built to travel, they settle on bark, on leaves, on dead wood. Most fail. A few succeed. Life is a lottery that sells an infinite number of tickets. You step through a slightly more open patch where the ground slopes and the trees thin enough to let a little starlight leak through. Not much, just a suggestion. You look down again at the soil, at the dark textures, and you realize that even in this open patch, the forest floor is not empty. It is layered with old leaves, some still recognizable, others reduced to lace by insects and microbes. Leaf veins remain like delicate skeletons, a reminder that decomposition is selective. Soft tissues go first. Stubborn fibers linger. Lignin, the compound that makes wood rigid, is famously hard to break down. Only certain fungi, especially white rot fungi, can do it efficiently. That ability changed Earth's history. There was a time, hundreds of millions of years ago, when woody plants evolved lignin, and for a while, not much could decompose it. Dead trees piled up. In swampy environments, that undecomposed plant matter was buried and compressed, slowly transformed into coal. So, if you have ever looked at a lump of coal, you have held ancient sunlight stored in plant bonds, saved from decomposition for geological ages. Then humans dug it up and burned it in a few centuries, releasing that carbon back into the air. A brief, hectic detour in the carbon cycle. The rainforest does not approve or disapprove. It simply responds. More CO2 can mean more plant growth in some cases, but also warmer temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, stressed ecosystems. The machine adjusts, and some parts break. Symbiosis is not a guarantee of stability. It is an adaptation to current conditions. Change the conditions too fast, and partnerships collapse. But the forest you are in tonight, this one moment, is still running its ancient routines. You walk until you find another fallen tree, larger, older. It lies like a toppled bridge, covered in fungi and small plants. Seedlings sprout from its decaying surface. Roots sink into the rotting wood, using it like soil. This is a nurse log, a dead tree becoming a cradle. In some forests, many seedlings start life this way, raised above the ground, away from some soil pathogens, given a moist, nutrient-rich substrate. It is a reminder that death is not a pause in the forest's story. It is a plot device. And while you are thinking about that, you notice something else in the dark. Not glowing mushrooms this time. A subtle shimmer on the log surface, like a wet thread catching the smallest light. A web of mycelium, perhaps, or a slime mold trail. Slime molds are another quiet horror, by the way. Not fungi, not animals, not plants, but organisms that can exist as single cells, then merge into a multicellular moving mass. When conditions are right, they can solve mazes in lab experiments in a crude way, following chemical gradients. They are proof that intelligence is not a single thing. But that is a different midnight story. For now, you stay with fungi and the slow dismantling of wood. Because the more you look, the more you see that the rainforest is built not just from living growth, but from the constant conversion of dead matter into usable form. This conversion shapes the entire ecosystem. It determines how quickly nutrients cycle. It influences how much carbon is stored. It affects which plants can thrive and which microbes dominate. Even the smell of the forest is shaped by decay. And that smell, strangely, is often what people love most. They come to rainforests and say it smells alive. They are correct. It smells alive because it smells like things dying efficiently. You keep walking, and the ground becomes softer, almost springy. A thick layer of decomposing leaves has built up in a small depression. Water collects here, making the decay more anaerobic, more sour. The smell changes, less clean earth, more fermentation. This is another branch of decomposition. When oxygen is limited, different microbes take over. They use alternative chemical pathways to extract energy. Instead of oxygen, they may use nitrates, sulfates, or other compounds as electron acceptors. The details are technical, and the outcome is sensory. You get different odors, sulfury notes, sour notes, a heavier, stagnant feel. Still decomposition, just a different style. The rainforest contains many microenvironments like this. A single fallen leaf can have an oxygen-rich top surface and an oxygen-poor underside pressed against wet soil. Different bacteria will colonize each side. Different reactions will occur a millimeter apart. So when you imagine the rainforest, do not imagine one uniform jungle. Imagine countless tiny worlds stacked together. And in each tiny world, organisms negotiate survival. You step out of the depression and onto slightly higher ground. The smells lighten again. You pass a tree with buttress roots, wide flanges that spread out like fins. These roots help stabilize tall trees in shallow soils. They also create pockets where leaves and moisture collect, forming small gardens of decay at the base. Even tree architecture is shaped by the soil's thinness and the constant rain. Above you, epiphytes cling to branches, plants that live on other plants without taking their nutrients directly. They use the air, rain, and debris that collects. They too rely on decomposition, little piles of trapped leaf litter breaking down in branch crooks, feeding their roots. It is compost in the sky. Everything is compost if you wait. You realize how easy it is to romanticize this, to call it balance. But balance is not a law here. It is a temporary outcome of competing forces. The rainforest is stable in the way a busy market can be stable, not because nothing changes, but because changes are absorbed by redundancy. Many species do similar jobs. Many decomposers overlap. Many plants share pollinators. So if one species fades, another may fill part of the gap, but not always. Some partnerships are so specific they can snap. The fig and the wasp, for example, is not easily replaced. And even the fungal networks under trees can be specific. Certain trees rely on certain mycorrhizal fungi. Different fungi offer different benefits. Some are better at phosphorus, some at nitrogen, some help with drought tolerance, some offer disease resistance. So the underground economy is complex and it can crash. But tonight, in this slow walk, you are not here to fix it. You are here to witness it gently. And you are here to notice that your idea of the forest as a place of vibrant life is only half the picture. The other half is the constant, quiet dismantling that makes new life possible. You stop near a patch of soil and see tiny white threads, mycelium, spreading like a spilled net. If you had a microscope, you could see the hyphae tips growing forward, secreting enzymes, sensing gradients of nutrients. Fungal hyphae grow at their tips, extending into new territory. They branch, fuse, form networks. Some fungi can even recognize self versus non-self, fusing with compatible hyphae and rejecting others. Even without a brain, they have a form of discrimination, a form of identity. The soil is full of this subtle behavior, and it is happening under your feet right now while you stand there. You shift your weight and the ground compresses. Tiny air pockets close. Water moves. Microbes are displaced. Your presence changes the microclimate for a moment. Then the soil relaxes and the processes continue. You are an interruption, but not an important one. That is the deep comfort of nature, if you allow it. You are not required. You are not the protagonist. You are just warm meat walking through a system, and the system will go on, with or without your thoughts. You start to feel the night's rhythm settle. The insects become more consistent, less like scattered noise, more like a woven fabric of sound. The forest's temperature stabilizes. The glow fungi you saw earlier are now behind you, hidden by leaves and distance. But you can still imagine them. Small chemical lanterns in the dark, a reminder that life will invent light if it needs light. And now, as you continue, the forest begins to feel older, not in appearance, in mood, as if the night itself is pulling back the curtain on time. You look at a tree trunk and realize you are seeing not just a tree, but the outcome of millions of years of selection. Roots that partner with fungi, leaves shaped to shed water, bark textures that host epiphytes or discourage them. Every feature is a compromise with the environment, and every organism is a historical document written in protein and cellulose. Deep time is not something you usually feel. Your life is too short, and your brain is too eager for immediate causes. But the rainforest makes deep time hard to ignore, because everything here is ancient, not as individuals, but as lineages. The partnerships you have been watching are older than many landscapes. Fungi and plants have been interacting since plants first moved onto land. Mycorrhizal relationships likely helped early plants survive without true roots. Lichens may have been among the early colonizers of land surfaces, contributing to soil formation long before forests existed. Insects have been farming fungi long before humans wrote the word agriculture. So when you stand here in the dark, you are standing in a place shaped by evolutionary experiments that ran for so long they stopped feeling like experiments. They became the default, and that is where the mind starts to drift. Because deep time does not argue with you. It does not debate. It just sits there, immense, like the boulder covered in lichen. You begin to sense the rainforest's indifference, not as hostility, but as neutrality. It is not trying to hurt you. It is not trying to help you. It is simply running. Energy in, energy out. Matter recycled. Information copied imperfectly. Selected by consequences. You can bring your human anxieties here, your worries about tomorrow, your regrets, your plans. The forest will not acknowledge them. A fungus does not care about your schedule. An ant does not care about your reputation. A tree does not care about your opinions. They care about water, nutrients, threats, and reproduction. And that simplicity can be soothing. If you are tired of being a person for a while, you walk slowly, and the path you imagined is not a path anymore, just a direction. The forest does not provide clear routes. It provides obstacles, roots like ribs, vines like cables, fallen branches like old bones. You step over them and you think about how humans like to imagine nature as a place that exists for our experience. But the rainforest is not scenery. It is infrastructure for itself. If you fall here and lie still, you do not become part of a tragic story. You become a nutrient event. Your body would be colonized quickly. Insects first, flies, beetles, ants, then bacteria and fungi. Soft tissues broken down, bones eventually exposed. In a warm, wet place, decomposition is fast. Within days, you would stop being recognizable. Within weeks to months, you would be mostly redistributed. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to remind you of scale. The rainforest is not sentimental, and it is not cruel. It is efficient, and efficiency feels like cruelty when you are the one being processed. But tonight, you are not being processed. Tonight, you are simply borrowing the perspective. You are allowed to look at the machine without being fed into it. You pause and rest your hand against a tree trunk. The bark is cool, slightly wet, textured with small ridges. You can feel life under it, not the tree's thoughts, because it has none, but the slow movement of water and xylem, the living cells in the cambium layer, the quiet maintenance. Trees are not static. They are slow hydraulics. They pull water upward through capillary action and transpiration, using the evaporation of water from leaves as a kind of suction. A tree is a drinking straw for the sky, and in the tropics, that flow is constant. During the day, it is strong. At night, it slows, but it never truly stops unless the tree is stressed or dead. Even then, the dead wood still holds water, still provides habitat, still decomposes. So the line between living and non-living in a rainforest is not sharp. It is a gradient of activity. You let your hand fall back to your side and keep walking. The forest feels endless, but you know it is not. Everything has edges. Even rainforests have borders where they meet rivers, mountains, savannas, human cut lines. But deep inside, in the night, it feels like a world that could swallow time itself. And that is when the mind starts to understand what deep time really means. Not just long ago, but long ongoing. The rainforest is a present moment that has been refined for millions of years. It is not built for you. It is not built for your species. You are, at best, a visitor. And visitors are always temporary. You step over another root and your foot lands on a patch of ground that feels slightly firmer, sandier, perhaps. The soil here has a different texture, and you wonder what controls that. Parent material, the type of rock underneath, rainfall patterns, flooding. In some rainforest regions, periodic flooding brings fresh sediments and nutrients. In others, Heavy rains leach soils over long periods, washing nutrients away, so the forest's productivity can depend on the geology beneath it and the water moving through it. This is why two forests can look equally lush but function differently. It is also why destroying rainforest soil is so damaging. Once the trees are gone, the nutrients stored in biomass are gone. Sun hits the soil directly, drying it, baking it, eroding it. Heavy rains wash it away. The thin layer of fertility can vanish quickly. The forest is not just trees. It is the whole cycle. Break the cycle, and replanting trees does not immediately restore it. But again, tonight is not about fixing. Tonight is about seeing. And you are seeing that the rainforest is not a cathedral of peace. It is a factory of transformation. And that transformation includes you, whether you like it or not. You keep walking, and gradually you feel your thoughts slow down. Not because you are trying to meditate, because the forest's scale forces your mind to give up some of its urgency. Your worries are still there, somewhere, like insects in the distance. But the closer sounds, the closer truths take over. Rot happens, symbiosis happens. Light appears in mushrooms. Stone becomes soil over centuries. And you, in your soft human life, are allowed to witness it. For a moment, you reach a place where the canopy opens slightly, and you can see a few more stars through gaps. They are small, sharp points. You remember, quietly, that those stars are not small. They are just far, and the light from them is old. Some of it left before your grandparents were born. Some left before humans learned to farm, which is amusing, considering ants did it first. In the rainforest, time feels slow. In the sky, time feels vast. Deep, time is everywhere. If you stop insisting on being central, you stand still for a while. The forest continues its noises. Somewhere, a branch drops a clump of water, and it lands with a soft slap on leaves. Somewhere, a beetle crawls across bark, scratching faintly. You cannot hear microbes, but you can imagine them, because they never stop. Even at night, decomposition continues. Enzymes keep working, as long as temperatures stay within their functional range. Cells keep dividing. Fungi keep extending. The forest keeps digesting itself, and that is why it is still here, because nothing stays dead long enough to become a problem. You begin to move again, and you sense that this walk is becoming less about the individual strange partnerships and more about the larger indifference that contains them. Because symbiosis is clever, but it is also small. The real story is the system that allows these partnerships to exist and persist. A planet with liquid water, a sun that provides steady energy, a carbon cycle that recycles matter, a biosphere that has had billions of years to complicate itself. The rainforest is one expression of that. A dense knot of life in warm, wet conditions. And you are a carbon-based observer, standing in it, borrowing its perspective. You do not need to understand every detail to feel the truth of it. You only need to notice that life is not a collection of separate things. It is a web of transactions, energy, nutrients, shelter, waste. Everything feeds something else. Everything is used. And if you find that thought dark, you can also find it comforting, because it means nothing is truly wasted. Not a fallen leaf, Not a dead insect, not a broken branch, not even the body of a wasp that died inside a fig, never seeing sunlight. The rainforest takes everything and turns it into continuation. You walk on deeper into the night, letting that idea settle like soil particles in still water. And somewhere ahead, the forest seems to stretch into time itself, waiting patiently, as it always has, for you to stop worrying and simply exist within it a little longer. A little longer, and you start noticing the kind of time that does not announce itself. It is in the way the leaf litter settles, layer by layer, like slow snowfall. It is in the way the soil never looks finished, because it is always becoming. It is in the small certainty that the forest would keep doing this, even if you forgot to watch. You take another step, and the ground gives a soft, wet complaint. Somewhere beneath you, a fungal thread flexes and keeps going. A colony does not stop because you walked over it. It just routes around the inconvenience like water around a stone. This is the part humans struggle with, the indifference, not cruelty, not malice, just the absence of a need to notice you. And if you let that sink in, it can feel oddly clean, because deep time is not only about the past, it is about the sheer confidence of processes that do not need your permission. You stand there in a living darkness, and the rainforest does not present you with meaning. It presents you with mechanisms. Energy comes in, mostly as sunlight. Energy goes out, mostly as heat. Matter cycles through bodies, through waste, through decay, through roots. Information copies itself through reproduction, with mistakes and consequences. That is the entire plot, told in 1,000 costumes. A leaf becomes sugar. Sugar becomes wood. Wood becomes fungus. Fungus becomes insect. Insect becomes bird. Bird becomes bacteria. And bacteria become the smell you mistake for peace. You look down at a patch of soil that seems almost black. Not dirt exactly, more like the color of old tea. That darkness is carbon-rich material, broken down and recombined so many times it has lost its original shape. In some places, that stabilized organic matter can stick around longer. In others, especially warm, wet places like this, it does not get the chance. Microbes work quickly, and roots grab what they can. That speed is part of why tropical forests can look like they are standing on endless fertility, while actually balancing on a thin layer of active recycling. A busy kitchen, not a stocked pantry. You could strip the trees away, and the system would cough. Sunlight would hit the soil like an accusation. Rain would strike bare ground harder and carry away the loosened particles. Nutrients would leak out of the cycle, into streams, into rivers, into the ocean. And then humans would stare at the exhausted ground, confused, as if the forest was just decoration that could be peeled off. But you are not peeling anything off tonight. Tonight, you are only walking and watching the machine continue, politely ignoring you. You pass a fallen branch, half buried in leaves. Its surface is stippled with tiny holes, neat and deliberate. Some beetle larva is inside, turning wood into frass, making room for air and fungi. And it reminds you, decomposition is not just chemistry, it is architecture. A log breaks down differently depending on who gets there first. If termites arrive early, they chew channels and bring their gut microbes along. If fungi colonize first, they lace the interior with hyphae, pre-digesting the wood with enzymes. If moisture is trapped, anaerobic bacteria make the whole process smell sour and heavy. The result is not one kind of rot. It is a sequence, a relay race. Early decomposers take easy sugars and simple compounds. Later decomposers tackle the stubborn molecules, like lignin, the tough polymer that makes wood rigid. And then the late-stage community feeds on what remains, thinning the last structure into soft earth. Even the insects follow this sequence. Different beetles prefer different stages of decay. Some need hard wood for their larvae to tunnel in. Others need wood that has been softened by fungi. So a dead tree becomes a timeline you can touch. You step around the branch and keep moving, and the forest seems to breathe closer. The canopy above blocks starlight, but not the sense of the sky being there. You feel it as pressure, warm air pressing down and wet air pressing sideways. And as you walk, you realize the forest is not only recycling bodies, it is recycling relationships. Symbioses start, shift, sometimes collapse, sometimes tighten. A fungus that trades nutrients today might become a parasite under different conditions. A mutualistic deal can turn sour if one partner stops paying. That is the quiet truth behind the word symbiosis. It does not mean harmony. It means proximity long enough for consequences to shape both sides. You stop near the base of a tree, where the roots flare out like fins. Buttress roots, built for shallow soil, built for storms, built for staying upright when the ground is more sponge than foundation. These roots also create pockets where leaf litter collects. A little nest of debris, damp and warm, full of microbes and small invertebrates. A miniature compost pile pressed against a living trunk. If you could shrink down and crawl into that pocket, you would find a whole crowd. Springtails, mites, tiny worms, larvae, all feeding on fragments, all feeding on each other. And over all of it, the fungi keep doing their quiet work, breaking down, trading, building networks, spreading like a thought you cannot stop having. You move again, and the forest floor becomes smoother for a few steps. Fewer roots, more continuous leaf litter. Your foot lands on something that gives slightly, like damp paper. A leaf skeleton. Only the veins remain, a delicate lace where soft tissue used to be. It is a small thing, but it points to a large fact. Decomposition is selective. Cellulose breaks down more easily than lignin for many organisms. Some microbes and fungi are specialists, with enzyme toolkits tuned for specific compounds. A leaf's softer parts vanish first, leaving the tougher veins behind. So the forest floor is full of partial ghosts, not glowing like the mushrooms, but present in absence, the shape of what used to be. And when you keep walking, you start noticing more absences. The way space opens up where a tree fell years ago. The way that gap is now filled with younger growth, vines, broad leaves reaching for light. A gap in the canopy is a sudden gift and a sudden battlefield. Plants that can grow fast race upward. Shade-tolerant seedlings that waited patiently in the understory finally get a chance to stretch. The forest is always renewing itself through small collapses. A storm breaks a branch, a tree topples, light pours in, and the whole community rearranges. Nothing is permanent here except the need to keep moving resources. You drift past a patch of ferns, their fronds catching droplets. The droplets fall one by one, each one a tiny impact. It makes you think of how water shapes everything in this place. Rain does not just feed plants. It drives the whole nutrient economy. Water dissolves minerals from rock. It carries ions through soil. It moves compounds from decomposing litter down toward roots. It also threatens to wash those nutrients away. So the rainforest is a place of constant holding on. Not hoarding, cycling. Roots form dense mats near the surface because that is where the nutrients appear first, released from fresh litter. Mycorrhizal fungi extend that reach, adding more surface area, more absorption, more bargaining power. It is a frantic kind of efficiency, hidden beneath the slow appearance. You walk, and as your eyes adjust to deeper night, you notice small, reflective points. Not eyes, not fireflies, just the wet shine of surfaces, the gloss of slime, the gleam of fungal skins. A snail's trail catches faint light. A beetle's shell looks lacquered. Everything is coated because moisture never really leaves. And here, in this wet stability, you can finally feel what deep time means in a biological sense. Not the time of rocks, but the time of lineages. The partnerships you saw earlier, fungi with roots, ants with crops, sloths with algae, bats with pitchers, figs with wasps. They did not appear because the forest wanted variety. They appeared because the same problems kept recurring. How do you get nutrients in poor soil? How do you digest food you cannot break down alone? How do you avoid predators when you are slow? How do you reproduce when your flowers are hidden inside a sealed chamber? Evolution answers problems with whatever materials are available, not with elegant design, with workable accidents. And once an accident works, it becomes tradition. You think about the fig wasp again. Briefly, a life spent crawling into a chamber that becomes a tomb. It is a story that sounds uniquely tragic until you remember most insects do not get happy endings. Insects are built for numbers, not longevity. A brief spark of metabolism, a few days of flight, a single reproductive mission, then the body becomes protein for something else. In a rainforest, the turnover is relentless. The only reason it does not feel like chaos is because it is so consistent. You step around a small puddle, and the water trembles from your movement. A mosquito larva might be down there, wriggling, filtering microbes. Or maybe it is a beetle larva, predatory, waiting for something soft to swim past. Even water pockets have food webs. Even a cup of rainwater trapped in a bromeliad can hold an ecosystem, bacteria, protozoa, insect larvae, sometimes small frogs. A forest is not just trees. It is containers inside containers. You keep walking, and your thoughts drift towards something the forest never says out loud because it cannot talk and because it does not care. All of this is powered by a star. Sunlight hits leaves. Leaves turn photons into chemical bonds. Those bonds move through bodies, through fungus, through ant colonies, through sloth muscles, through bat hearts. Then, eventually, the energy leaks out again as heat. That is what life does. It speeds up the flow of energy from concentrated to dispersed. A fancy way of saying it helps the universe do what it was already going to do. You can take comfort in that if you like. Your existence is not a rebellion against physics. It is physics wearing a moist organic disguise. You pause again, and the forest seems to pause with you. Not truly, of course, just in the way your attention narrows. You hear a steady insect chorus, like a distant engine. You hear a soft rustle nearby, maybe a lizard in leaves, maybe something smaller. And you wonder, in the quiet way people wonder at night, how old is this place? Not the individual trees, the rainforest as a biome. Rainforests have shifted and expanded and contracted over geological time, following climate. During ice ages, many tropical forests became fragmented, reduced to refuges, pockets of humidity in a drier world. Those refuges preserved lineages, allowed diversification, and when wetter conditions returned, forests expanded again. So even the rainforest is not eternal. It is resilient, but not invulnerable. The species within it carry histories of isolation and reunion, of population bottlenecks and expansions. The diversity you see is partly the result of these pulses. Forests breaking into islands of green, then reconnecting. Deep time is not smooth. It has weather. And now, as you stand in this present night, you are in one frame of a long, unromantic film. You take another step, and the smell shifts again. A faint, sweet note, like overripe fruit, mixed with earth. Something has fallen recently. You find it, a fruit split on the ground, soft flesh exposed. Already, small flies are there, and maybe a beetle and ants testing the edges. Fermentation begins quickly in warmth. Yeasts, which are fungi that decided to live as single cells, start metabolizing sugars. They produce alcohols and other compounds that change the scent. That scent is not a side effect, it is a signal. Fruit scents attract animals that will eat the fruit and spread seeds. Some plants rely on mammals, some on birds, some on bats. Some fruits ripen with strong smells specifically for nocturnal dispersers. So even rot can be recruitment. The fruit's soft collapse is also a message. Eat me now, before microbes take it all. The forest is constantly negotiating the timing of decay. If you are a plant, you want your fruit to be appetizing long enough to be carried away. If you are a microbe, you want that sugar immediately. If you are an insect, you want the fruit at the stage that matches your larvae's needs. And so, the fruit becomes a small arena of competing claims. You do not touch it. You simply watch it exist, briefly, as a concentrated package of energy. Then you move on. Your walk feels less like traveling through space and more like traveling through scales, from glowing gills to fungal networks to insect agriculture to the slow vandalism of lichen on rock. And now, to the sense that the rainforest is only one skin of a much larger planet. The ground under you is not infinite. It is crust, thin compared to the mantle beneath. The rock that lichens dissolve, grain by grain, was once molten, long before it cooled enough to be colonized. And the oxygen you breathe, that soft chemical permission, is not guaranteed. It was made over long spans of time by photosynthetic organisms, cyanobacteria in ancient oceans, algae, plants, a planetary transformation caused by microbes. Without oxygen, animals like you do not exist. Without oxygen, fungi still exist, but different. Without oxygen, the whole story changes. So when you inhale humid air under the canopy, you are breathing a product of ancient microbial labor. Congratulations! You are alive because bacteria changed the atmosphere and accidentally made it toxic for themselves. That is one of my favorite cosmic jokes. You keep walking, and the canopy opens slightly again, enough to show a few stars. They do not twinkle much through thick air, but they are there. You know, if you have the energy to remember that those stars are engines too, fusion turning hydrogen into helium, releasing energy that travels across space. That energy, after a long trip, becomes warmth on leaves, then sugar, then ant muscle, then fungal glow. So the rainforest is a way for starlight to become motion in the mud. It is almost poetic until you remember that it is also a way for starlight to become parasites and predation and slow starvation and bones. Cozy cosmic horror in chlorophyll green. You step carefully around a root that arches like a sleeping snake. Your foot lands on firmer ground, and you feel the slight crunch of dry leaf edges. Not everything is wet. Some leaves shed water and stay crisp on top, like roofs over softer layers. This layering matters. Microclimates again? A dry leaf surface might host different fungi than the saturated layer below. Some microbes form spores that wait for wet conditions. Others remain active in thin water films you cannot see. Even in what looks dry, there is water at the microscopic scale, a thin film on a particle, a droplet trapped between fibers. For bacteria, a film of water is an ocean. For fungi, it is a highway. So, the forest is wet in ways you cannot measure with your skin alone. You pause near a tree trunk with pale patches. At first you think it is lichen again, but the texture is smoother, more like a thin crust of paint. It could be a biofilm, bacteria and fungi living in a slimy layer, protected by extracellular substances they secrete. A community glued together, sharing resources, resisting drying, resisting invasion. Biofilms are how microbes build cities. Not with stone, but with slime. And that slime is not passive. It can trap nutrients, hold water, and create gradients of oxygen and chemistry across tiny distances. Inside a biofilm, the outer layer might have access to oxygen, while deeper layers are anaerobic. Different microbes occupy different zones. Trading metabolites. A micro-city with neighborhoods, without anyone writing a zoning law. You let your hand hover near the trunk, then pull it back. You do not need to touch everything. The rainforest is full of things that would love to colonize you. Given time, you continue, and the soundscape remains steady. It lulls, not because it is quiet, but because it is consistent. White noise made of life. And in that consistency, your mind starts offering you human questions. What is the point of all this? What does it mean? The forest does not answer, but it does demonstrate something useful. Meaning is not required for function. The fungal networks move nutrients without understanding nutrients. The ants farm without understanding agriculture. The sloth hosts algae without understanding camouflage. The fig traps wasps without understanding tragedy. And yet, the outcomes are real. Sometimes, if you are tired enough, that can be permission. You do not have to understand your whole life tonight. You do not have to solve your entire future. The planet does not solve itself. It just runs. You walk through another slightly open patch, and the air feels marginally cooler. A faint draft moves between trunks, carrying the smell of water. A stream might be nearby. Waterways in rainforests are veins for nutrients and sediments, but also barriers for some species. Rivers can separate populations and drive speciation over long time. Two groups of animals split by a river slowly diverge in genetics. Over enough time, they become different species. So, a river is not just water, it is an evolutionary knife. Even for plants, rivers can matter. Flooding deposits fresh sediments, bringing nutrients that leached upland soils lack. So, you can get forests that are richer along floodplains with different tree communities. The rainforest is not uniform green. It is patchwork, stitched by water and geology. You do not need to see the stream to feel its influence. The forest already smells a little different, as if the air has been rinsed. You step over a small cluster of mushrooms that do not glow. Their caps are pale and they look delicate, but they are doing the same job as the glowing ones. Eating, building, spreading spores. Only some species pay the extra energy cost to make light. Light is not free. It is energy converted into photons, energy that could have been used for growth. So bioluminescence must pay for itself. If it is an adaptation, it must increase spore dispersal enough to matter or provide some other advantage. Otherwise, it fades over evolutionary time. This is another deep time lesson. Traits persist only if they keep being useful, or if they are linked to something useful, or if selection simply does not notice them. Nature is not a museum curator. It is an accountant who only cares about survival. You keep walking, and your attention drifts back to lichens again. Briefly, those slow crusts on stone, able to pause life, able to endure. Lichen feels like the opposite of rainforest chaos. Stillness, patience. But they share a theme with everything else you have seen. Collaboration. The rainforest looks like competition because it is crowded, but it is also full of alliances because alliances are efficient. Even your own body is an alliance. Mitochondria in your cells were once free-living bacteria long ago, captured or merged in a partnership so deep it became inseparable. That is why your cells have little power plants with their own DNA. You carry ancient symbiosis in every breath. So when you watch ants farming fungus, you are watching a large-scale echo of something your cells already did. A smaller organism moved in, and now the host cannot live without it. The forest is full of that pattern. Life solving problems by merging. You walk on, and the night feels thick enough to hold. You pass under a branch draped with moss, and maybe lichen, and the hanging strands brush your shoulder like cold hair. You think, briefly, about how these hanging communities capture moisture from air, fog, mist, dew. Cloud forests higher up take this to an extreme. Trees there harvest clouds, and water drips down even when it is not raining. That changes everything. Slower decomposition in cooler temperatures, different fungal communities, more epiphytes. A rainforest is not a single biome. It is a gradient of wetness and temperature, rising and falling with altitude. Every few hundred meters can change the rules. But here, in this lowland heat, decomposition remains fast. The forest insists on turnover. You step near another fallen log, and you notice a line of ants again, smaller than the leafcutters. They are carrying something pale, maybe bits of insect, maybe fungal fragments, maybe larvae. Ants do so much unseen work. They move nutrients, aerate soil, prey on other insects, spread seeds in some cases. Some plants even recruit ants as bodyguards, offering nectar or shelter in exchange for defense against herbivores. Acacia ants are famous for this in some regions, though different systems exist in different forests. A plant grows hollow thorns. Ants live inside, and the ants attack anything that tries to eat the plant. Mutualism with teeth. It is the same logic as the bat and the pitcher plant, just more violent. Shelter in exchange for service. And when you see enough of these bargains, you begin to suspect the rainforest is less a community and more a marketplace. Everyone trading, everyone optimizing, everyone acting as a resource for someone else. Even you, if you stayed too long, would become tradable material. You keep walking, and the idea of deep time continues to widen. You imagine the forest not as a single night walk, but as repeated nights, wet seasons and dry seasons, storm years and calmer years. Generations of insects living and dying between the same roots. A tree might stand here for centuries, quietly recording climate in its growth rings, if it makes clear rings at all. Many tropical trees do not form distinct annual rings the way temperate trees do, because seasons are less dramatic, time is less punctuated. Instead, growth can respond to rain patterns, to drought pulses, to light availability. A more complicated diary. Scientists can still read parts of it: isotopes in wood, chemistry in leaves, carbon stored in soils, ways to infer past climates. But the forest itself does not store memory as narrative. It stores memory as structure, which is why, when humans disrupt it quickly, the forest cannot adapt at human speed. It adapts at the speed of reproduction and selection, which is fast for microbes and insects, slower for trees. Deep time is powerful, but it is not quick. You step over a root and feel a slight ache in your ankle, a reminder you are made for different terrain. Your body evolved for savannas and mixed landscapes, for endurance walking on firmer ground. The rainforest is not your default setting. It tolerates you briefly, but it does not welcome you. Too many things here can sting, bite, infect, irritate, or simply make you slip. Even the air can bother you, full of spores and volatile compounds. And yet, people come here and feel awe. Awe is just what your brain does when it meets complexity too big to hold all at once. It calls it beautiful because that is easier than admitting you are overwhelmed. The forest does not care what you call it. It keeps running. You keep moving, and eventually you notice the faintest paling in the darkness. Not dawn, just a subtle shift as clouds thin as starlight changes, as your eyes fatigue. Night in the rainforest is not a single block. It has phases. Some animals become active right after dusk. Others peak later. Predators and prey time their movements. Owls hunt when small mammals move. Frogs call when humidity is right. Insects synchronize songs to find mates. Even fungi time spore release with humidity and air currents. So the night is scheduled without anyone reading a clock. You slow near a patch of ground that looks oddly smooth, almost cleared. It might be a place where something large rested, or where water flowed recently. You imagine, briefly, how quickly evidence disappears here. Footprints soften, edges collapse, leaves fall, rain erases. In a rainforest, the surface forgets. That is why so much of the system's continuity is underground. Roots persist, fungal networks persist, seed banks persist, soil microbes persist. The surface is an active layer, constantly rewritten. And that brings you back, again, to the underground economy. Mycorrhizal fungi are not all the same. Some penetrate root cells, forming structures called arbuscules, tiny tree-like shapes inside the plant cells, where nutrients are exchanged. These are arbuscular mycorrhizae, common with many tropical plants. Other fungi form sheaths around roots, exchanging nutrients without entering cells. These ectomycorrhizae are more common in some temperate and boreal forests, though they exist in the tropics too. Different systems, different rules. Same basic bargain. Sugar for minerals. And the bargain affects how carbon moves into soil. Plants send a significant fraction of their photosynthesized carbon below ground into roots and fungal partners. Some of that carbon becomes microbial biomass. Some becomes stabilized in soil, depending on conditions. So fungal networks are not just helpers for plants. They are part of the planet's carbon storage machinery. If you change fungal communities, you can change how much carbon is held in soils versus released as CO2. This is why scientists care about fungi, even if fungi do not pose for pictures. They are quiet drivers of global cycles. You keep walking, and the forest seems to stretch ahead without ending. But your mind, even as it softens, keeps collecting these simple truths. Life is not separate. Life is negotiated. Life is recycled. Life is powered by a star and shaped by consequences. And deep time is not a backdrop. It is the main character, the one that never sleeps. You pause again and listen. The insect chorus is steady, as if it has always been there. And that is the trick. It has always been there, in some form, for so long that your brief presence cannot compete. You are a single warm moment walking through a system that measures itself in millions of years. And still, the forest allows you to be here, for now, as long as you do not demand that it care. You take one more slow step forward, and the understory opens into a slightly clearer space, where the ground looks less cluttered. It feels like a threshold, not a destination. The kind of place where your thoughts can widen further, from forest time to planet time, and then beyond.